First Lady Neville's, Crystal Neville's, to the entire Brooklyn Chapel and Strangers Home church family, collective families, as well as to the Greenwood, Mississippi family, to all members who are assembled here tonight. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit about the importance of self-care, why it's helpful for us as we seek to maintain positive mental health. As I get started with any presentation, I like to tell a personal story. And so as you work through this presentation with me and take this journey with me, the one thing I want you to keep in your mind and to ask yourself is why self-care is important. I'll tell you a personal story. Here, and some of you may know her, that's my mom on my left, Cassie Collins, and that's my grandmother, Mrs. Doris Osborne. To give you a little bit about my family and why self-care and looking at mental health became so important to me, my grandmother Doris was a wife, a mother to 11 kids, and she lived with a serious mental illness. For many years of her life, she navigated her care between my mother and my parents, as well as my Aunt Constance, as well as some of my other aunts and uncles. And as I started to reflect on, as I got older, I started to look at my mom's experience as a caregiver. I started to look at my grandmother's life experience. I started to look at my aunt's experience as a caregiver. And we noticed that as they worked with my grandmother and helped her navigate her care, she had some good days and she had some bad days, as we all have, but she lived with a serious mental illness. And so as I look from the caregiver perspective, my mother and aunt experienced burnout sometimes, compassion fatigue, secondary stress. Also, growing up in Greenwood, there were limited resources, a lack of awareness really about what it is to take care of a person who lives with a serious mental illness. And oftentimes there was a lack of self-care and really no outlets. And so that all started me as I was going on my educational journey to really start to look at mental health. And here I am, 40 years old, almost walking that same walk that my mother walked and my grandmother walked. And so as I go back and start thinking about why we need self-care, again, I asked you that question. Think about your own life. Ask yourself the question, why do you need self-care? And I'll tell you why, just looking at my life, because we all have competing priorities. For example, I'm a Christian. I live near Nashville, and so I attend Mount Zion Baptist Church, and Friendship is my home church. I'm a wife to a wonderful husband, Timothy. I'm a full-time caregiver now to both my parents, Cassie and Charles. They are at a point where they are aging, and so I take care for them. My husband and my sister help me out. I'm also a professor and I work in administration. I'm an author, YouTuber, have a couple channels that I try to maintain, but also I'm a journalist in a sorority. And when I think about my life, I realize I say, hey, we have so many competing priorities going on here. How do we maintain mental health and positive mental health? So I want you to take assessment of your life and ask yourself, what really do I have going on in my life? And how does it all impact me mentally? Because it has an impact on your life. And so again, some of my personal reasons, I started to think through things, and really 2011 was a pivotal point for me because I had a near-death experience. And it led me to write my book, The She Devotional, which I wrote in 2015 after I graduated with my PhD. But I started to reflect on things, and I realized that as I was learning more about social work, I was learning more about mental health, I was learning more about myself and learning also about some of the patterns I had seen growing up as it related to self-care, right? And so when we think about society, we all have these family expectations, right? Our family puts pressure on us. We sometimes put this pressure on us, but there's an expectation to be successful. Coming from the Mississippi Delta, we want to be successful. So we go to Valley, we go to Tougaloo, Jackson State, whatever it is to get those degrees. And that's a wonderful thing, but that does cause some stress, right, in our lives. There's societal expectations. I'm an African-American woman. Oftentimes, as Black folks in this society, we can't make mistakes. We can't get things wrong because there's a lot of pressure on us. And so we know that we can't necessarily always take that in, but we do deal with those pressures just societally. When are you getting married? When are you having a baby? When are you going to do X, Y, and Z? We have and live with those expectations. Religious expectations. For those of you like me, who are in members of the faith-based community, you know there's a big expectation, especially if you are in leadership. For example, Pastor Neville's is leading 2 congregations, he and Tina and their family. There's a lot of expectation that's required of not only our faith leaders, but also of our parishioners, of our congregants. Are you going to go to choir practice? Are you showing up to the church picnic? Are you doing those things? And so you're doing that on top of your every ordinary day life. So that causes this pressure to build on us. And so I found myself in 2011 getting to a point where I was physically burned out and stressed out. I was completing my PhD program, had signed up for a second master's. I really didn't want to, but my leaders at the University of Alabama were saying, Shawnee, you're going to need this for your future. And they were correct, but it was a lot of stress on me. And so it started to take a toll on my physical health, so much so that, I just was tired and sleepy, and sometimes sleepy, sometimes not sleeping. So I had a lot of different things going on. If you've heard of the expression being pulled in multiple directions, I really felt that way in 2011. And it was in 2011 when I was coming from Mississippi, going back to Tuscaloosa. It was raining one day. My father had been saying, Shawnee, get those tires fixed on your Nissan Altima. Get your tires fixed. Pay attention to your tires, girl. You're on the highway. And I kept pushing it back because I said, okay, Daddy, I'll do it. Well, I almost ran off the road. Literally, I could have flipped off of a bridge, and it's by the grace of God that I'm here today. And so that was my wake-up call. And often when it comes to self-care, we have to have a wake-up call for us to really get the message that God is saying, slow down. And so, again, let's look at what is self-care. Right? I don't want you to have a tragic wake-up call like I did. I wasn't harmed or anything, but it was so scary to me, that experience, that I knew I had to move my life in a different direction and scale it back very much so. So self-care is a survival skill. It is essential for each and every one of us. I like to think of it as something that is moral, okay? It refers to the practices that we do to reduce our stress, to maintain and improve our short and long-term health and well-being. It is necessary for each and every one of us on this Zoom to be effective and successful at whatever endeavor we undertake, whether that's doing work in ministry, whether that's being a good wife, a good husband, sister, spouse, whatever. You have to take care of yourself. Self-care allows you to honor yourself as well as your professional and personal commitments, because we all work jobs. We all have stressful jobs. We all have families. Sometimes dealing with our family members can be stressful. We may have illnesses and different things going on. But when we take time to engage in self-care, it helps us maintain and meet these commitments that we have, and to do so while maintaining our mental health. Okay, so self-care, and this is a big wheel that I found, it can look like you just taking the time to slow down. It looks like you saying, okay, I accept that I cannot do everything, that God has given us 24 hours in a day, but guess what? I can't do every single thing. It accepts that I manage those priorities that are most important, and I delegate responsibilities to other people. It means that I ask for support from community members. It means that when I'm getting true self-care, I'm kinder, I'm self-aware, I'm aware of what's stressing me out. So I'm not, having a heated moment with everybody every 5 minutes, because I'm aware of what's going on with me. And so I can regulate my emotions. I won't go over all of those, but it means that I'm also finding pleasure in those things that I perhaps have put to the side because I'm not getting self-care, okay? So ask yourself this question as you look at this presentation: how do I honor myself, mind, body, and spirit? I wrote the She devotional where I talk about the mind, body, and spirit connection, and it is so true. If your spirit's not in alignment with God, everything else is just going to fall out of whack, okay? If you are physically not in the best shape, not necessarily adhering to the medicines the doctor have given you, it's going to impact your spiritual life because you don't feel like reading the Bible, you're too tired, or you're too sick to do anything. And if your mind is constantly stressed out, you're constantly dealing with a level of fatigue, you can't do anything else in that spirit or in that body. or you're struggling to do it, because we know the mind is our storehouse. Everything happens with that brain activity. So when you are physically stressed out, it's hard for you to move forward and function. And that's what I was talking about when I was in 2011 experiencing so much burnout. And again, the next question you might ask yourself is, how do I honor my life's purpose? A long time ago, maybe in 2003, I read the book by Rick Warren, and he said, we all have a purpose-driven life. That's one of my favorite books. I started to reread it last year. But how do you honor the purpose that God has put in your life? What is your purpose? When you are extremely stressed out and not being intentional about your everyday activities, you aren't really walking in that full purpose. You might be there, you might be on the road, but you may not be walking truly in the purpose that God has put on your life. And the question that is so important is, if I'm not honoring myself, what is the cost? What is the personal cost? What is it costing my children? What is it costing my spouse? What is it costing me? What is it costing me financially? Okay, it's a lot of money when you start dealing with a lot of pills. I'm gonna tell you, I'm a caregiver. When you are constantly in and out of the doctor's office, it becomes costly. What is it doing to me spiritually when I'm not getting that self-care? I'm not hearing from God. I'm not in tune with what he's telling me. What is it costing me in my moral and ethical life? Am I making the best decisions on my job, or am I just letting things slide that I know are not necessarily benefiting me, benefiting the organization? So we have to be mindful that self-care is an ethical imperative. Okay, seems like we got a little stuck here. And so again, I wanted to pose the questions to you, and these are some simple questions you can ask yourself. If you have more no's than yes, then you may want to get to a place where you practice self-care, okay? So do I eat regularly? Every morning, I try to get up and eat some oatmeal or a smoothie. I'm not always consistent with it, but I do try because I need to nourish my body. Do I have fun? Am I engaged in physical activity? Why is physical activity important? Why? Because it stimulates our body. It gets those wheels turning. It helps us to alleviate the stress. If you're moving through life and not getting any walking in, any physical activity, running, or even just movement around, your stress is simply compounding. Do I take time to slow down and take care of myself when I'm sick? That's a critical question, because oftentimes when we are sick or we have a headache, it could be a headache or a stomach ache, sometimes we just push through. We push through because that's what's been taught to us sometimes culturally, is what we've learned from others in our environment. But it is okay to say, you know what, let me go sit down for 10 minutes, or let me just take the day off. That job will still be there. And my sister and I, Kanika, have this conversation all the time. We say, honey, if you get sick tomorrow, they'll have a replacement in place for you within 24 hours. So we have to be intentional about slowing down and taking the time off if necessary to attend to our health. Do I get enough sleep? If you recall, I said in 2011, it was hard for me to go to sleep. It was very difficult. I just had insomnia. That's a sign that you're burned out. Are you available to reflect on your thoughts? Are your thoughts racing all the time? Are you here, there, and everywhere else? That's important because it lets you know that you are burning out and that you are also experiencing anxiety, okay? Do I take time to express myself creatively? Are you journaling? Are you writing? That's how I wrote the She Devotional. I would always journal. But when I was at a point of, not being in self-care, that stopped for me. Do I say no to extra responsibilities? Sometimes we want to be the martyr and we don't do it intentionally, but we take on so much extra things that it causes us a lot of stress. Do I make time to spend with the people who make me happy? If you're always in an environment that's sort of toxic, where the people you're around are not making you happy, that contributes to additional stress. So you want to make sure that you're taking time to be around people who bring joy and happiness and peace to your life. Do you love yourself and speak positive words over your life? That's so important for all of us to do. Self-love, when we talk about self-care, we're really talking about self-love. And in all of it, the bigger scheme, we're talking about God's love for us. And do you allow your emotions to show, or do you bottle them in, or constantly just suppress them and not deal with them? We have to learn a better way. And it takes time, and it takes grace, and it takes patience. But I know that we can all do it together. So the next thing is that when we are not in a place of having self-care, when we are burned out and dealing with secondary stress, we become essentially stressed out. We become like this woman in this photo. She has her hand on her head, and there are 5 or 6 different people around her saying, I need this, I need that. And I think we can all relate to feeling that way. So again, it leads us to the question, what is stress? There are different types of stress: acute, chronic, positive, and negative stress. So stress is when the body is preparing to defend itself, okay? So there's chronic stress that we all live with, and those are basic things like paying your bills, family stressors. I'm a caregiver now, so there's always going to be a level of stress dealing with aging parents, but that's just the cycle of life, and we all have to go through that. Positive stress could be something like pregnancy or marriage. You know, you're getting ready for that. And it's a very stressful time, but it's also a happy and joyous time. Negative stress can be dealing with things like financial problems, divorce, or even perhaps this pandemic that we are all in. So what I'm saying is that we all deal with stress on a day-to-day basis. There's no way to get around it, whether it's positive or negative. We are all inundated with stress. But if we don't manage our stress and recognize our stressors, it can impact our mental health very negatively. So stress equals many emotions. So in a day or in a week, we can be happy, panicked, shocked, disappointed, anxious, upset, silly, brave. Stress causes us to deal with many emotions. And sometimes our emotions are carried out in our behaviors. So whatever I'm thinking, it's also how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm going to behave in that particular way. So we are powerful people. So we know that through understanding and learning and seminars and webinars like this, we can learn to manage our stressors. And when we manage those stressors, we can manage our negative emotions. Okay, I think I went too far on my slide. Okay, and so again, stress leads to this phenomena called burnout. And burnout can be described as the performance anxiety, or just an overwhelming sense of trying to perform or meet standards that are almost really impossible. So burnout leads to poor work performance. Again, we are faith members, but we also have to work. So if you're extremely burned out, you're not necessarily doing the best on your job or even in your home life. It can lead to depression and sadness. We become very irritable. Have you ever been in a place where you're snapping everybody up, or where you're just extremely depressed, or you're very sad, you don't know what's going on? That's a symptom of being burned out and stressed out. That's a symptom that you need more self-care. We isolate ourselves. We have health issues such as high blood pressure, chronic colds. Have you ever been in a place where you're constantly having a cold? You can't get over that cold. You start to have headaches. You start to have ulcers, stomach pain, acid reflux. Those are all symptoms that you or I may need to practice more self-care. We become detached from reality, or we do things to sort of medicate, self-medicate. We're not really intentional about what we're doing. We're not really paying attention to those whom we love, those within our environments. We just really become detached. We disengage from others. Why? Because we're so burned out and we aren't practicing self-care. We become overly sensitive. Have you ever been to a place where someone says something and it just sends you through the roof, or it sends that person through the roof? That's a sign that your emotions are not necessarily being regulated well, or my emotions are not regulated well, okay? And that we need more self-care. We become overly critical of ourselves, very cynical about life. Everything is negative. Nothing is positive. We can't see the joy in God's day. And we know that every day to be alive is a blessing, but we become very cynical and negative when we lack self-care. You can't see the positive in anything, okay? And then it also leads to suicide ideation. And this is when a person is thinking about committing suicide or ending their life. And they may not necessarily act it out, but what they may say is, you know, this is the worst day ever. I wish I could end it all. I don't see a future for myself. Those are words or words that let you know a person is contemplating suicide. So what are some of the primary barriers to self-care? Well, number one barrier is time management, meaning we may have poor boundaries. We are not necessarily identifying the stressors, number one, but also we are not setting boundaries with people in our work environment, and we are not setting boundaries with ourselves. And what that means is that we're just taking on everything. we're not realistic about our time. We may have to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we know we have a 15-minute commute, but we are getting up at 7:45 and rushing out the door. That means time management is poor. And what that does is it contributes to more stress on top of the stress you're already dealing with. So we can get our time together. That's a good start. So have a boundary. If you know yourself that sometimes you have a tendency to run late, that's okay. It's something that can be changed. Okay. We are all works in progress. No one is perfect, but set that clock a little bit earlier. Set it about 30 or 40 minutes earlier so that you give yourself enough time on the highway. You'll account for accidents. Anything can happen. You give yourself enough time so that you're not rushing into the office, so that you're not feeling the stress of, hey, are my coworkers looking at me? Is my boss looking at me? You know, you're trying to do everything frantically. So give yourself that space. So alleviate that stressor by having time management skills. Sometimes we feel unworthy. And this is why we don't practice self-care. Sometimes we don't know that we serve a good God who loves us, who forgives us, who thinks that we are the cat's meow, okay? And sometimes we feel unworthy of time to ourselves. Sometimes we say, do I really need this me time? I have my parents, I have my husband, but the answer is always going to be yes. Why? Because when we do the opposite, it leads us to stress, to burnout, to those other things. So yes, you deserve me time. If you want to go to the nail shop, take that time. Find someone to help to keep the kids. Find someone to cook or get a meal catered. You are worthy of that. And I'm here to tell you right now, because God says you are worthy. Sometimes it's difficult for us to try new experiences. So for example, if you are looking to say, you know what, I always wanted to try skiing, and this summer my husband and I or my spouse and I are going to take a trip, and we just are going to do this just to get away. Well, what would they say if I'm going skiing or if I'm doing something different? It doesn't matter what they say. You are doing what you need to do to take care of your mental health. And if you want to go skiing for 3 months in Colorado, I say more power to you. Because if it's going to bring you a sense of peace, a sense of calm, a sense of anxiety, and allow you to move throughout your life, in your work life, your family life, your church life, and your home life, and be happy, you do whatever you need to take and step out on faith and try those new experiences. And sometimes the barrier to self-care is not really having a goal or a plan. And we know that a lack of preparation leads to what? Oftentimes failure. So it's important to have a self-care plan for you to say, okay, this is the goal I want to hit, whether it's weight loss, whether it's, reading the Bible, whatever it is, having a plan in place so that you can meet those goals. And oftentimes there's a lack of motivation, and I put pride. Sometimes we just don't feel like being accountable to ourselves. Maybe we're in a place where we're not, really feeling it. And we just say, you know what, I'm comfortable being where I am. But we know that, nothing is changed without us pushing our comfort zones, right? So we have to get to a place where we say, you know what, I'm in this comfort zone of doing everything frantically. I don't have boundaries. I'm taking on too much. We have to say, I'm going to make a change. Like I had to say in 2011, I'm doing too much. Shawnee, it's time to switch. And sometimes we don't necessarily change because of cultural attitudes. Maybe I saw mama and grandma and granddaddy working from sun up to sundown. So I think that's what I have to do. That's what I have to do to feel worthy. But regardless of what you are doing, your worthiness is not contingent upon your output. You are worthy just because you are God's child. So we have to get to a point where we say our worthiness is not contingent upon how many hours I put in on my job, or how many hours I give to the chapter meeting, to the Deltas, or to the AKAs, or to the Zetas, or to my church. You are worthy because you are a child of God. And sometimes we also have to push back on some of those cultural attitudes. I saw that my mother was caregiving, but I also saw the beauty in that, the beauty that is taking care of your parents. But I also saw some things in my household, like us constantly having parties, and when my parents hosted them all the time. That caused a lot of stress, and they were fun and everything, but sometimes that responsibility needed to be delegated to other people within the family. Okay, you take it this year. We had it for the last 5 years. And hubris is one thing I want to mention. Sometimes we don't let stuff go because of pride. We feel like I'm the only person who can do that bulletin board at Amanda Elsie, and I've been doing it for 17 years, and I'm the only person who can do it. I'm the only person who can sing soprano, and I'm the best one, and I got to be at every single choir practice. Hubris or pride makes us think that there's no one else who can do it. All right. So we have to get rid of that, get self out of the way and say, oh God, okay, God, I yield to what you want me to do. Help me not to take on too much because it's not of your will. Okay. You want me to be healthy and to prosper. Okay. So again, a self-care plan looks like, how are you going to manage things in your mind, body, and spirit? What is that going to be? What is that commitment to you? Okay. So before I can commit to my wonderful husband, Tim, and to Cassie and Charles, my parents, I have to say, what does Shawnee need? Okay. In order for me to be an effective wife, I have to say, what do I need to be successful for me to stay here on this earth, for me to have mental health, to have balance, to have peace in my life? So your self-care plan, however that looks, is your commitment to honoring yourself first, and include God in that plan, because he'll tell you what to take off your plate, what to delegate to other people, and you will start to see a sense of peace and calm coming into your life. Okay. Another thing we can do to really get us into more of a positive mental health is to detox from our Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube. It causes a lot of drama sometimes, and they can be very positive things, especially if you're in business world or just connecting with my friends. I love, being on Facebook now, but I was off for a couple of years, and I do that very often because I need that peace and I don't need the pressure to constantly respond to people. So set limits for yourself, mute your calls, put a do not disturb on, and always understand, just because a person texts you, you don't have to respond right away. And if a person doesn't understand that it's okay to put a pause in between a text message, then, sometimes they may need to manage their expectations of you and of the relationship. So keep that in mind. Things that we can also do to short more self-care is to rebalance our workload. If something is causing you a lot of stress at work, and sometimes projects are put upon us, it's okay to say no. It's okay to understand that you have a life before you go to that job. Okay. So work-life balance is essential. That's why I talk about the spirit, health, and emotions. Balance is essential. And we all get out of balance. I say it all the time, even though I've written a book, I get out of balance sometimes too, but we know that we have the tools in life to get back centered. So think about what you want your life to be. Okay. Think about your age, think about what you saw growing up, and think about, what do I truly want in my life, and how do I envision my life and my family? What's going to be the center? For me, it looks like God being the center. It looks like my family being truly important to me, managing those priorities, making sure I take pictures with my mom and dad as they're aging and having memorable experiences with them. Okay. And yes, my job is truly important, but I'll tell my supervisor in a minute, can we pass this job on to someone else? I've been doing it for 4 years, and I don't think twice about it, because I know that when individuals see good employees, which is a great thing to be, sometimes they can put that workload on you and say, hey, I have this task. Hey, can you do this? And what you'll find is that your task load has gone from 5 items to now 15, and everyone else in the office may not be doing or necessarily contributing as much. Okay. So think about it. And if you choose to not rebalance your workload, you have to ask yourself, what is it costing me? What is it costing my family? What is it costing my friends? What is it costing my personal health? The next thing you also may need to think about is, how can you release negativity? Self-care entails letting go of thoughts, people, environments, and habits that disrupt your mental peace. Okay. And this could mean anything. Sometimes our church friends and our church members are good people with well intentions, but sometimes they can be toxic. Sometimes they haven't worked through some things. Sometimes our coworkers can be toxic. Sometimes family members can be toxic. Sometimes we can be toxic. So we have to become more self-aware of how we are showing up, how we are presenting to others, how we are interacting and engaging with others, so that we are not putting negativity onto other people, but also we have to put those boundaries in place so that other people aren't dumping their negativity onto us. Okay. So these things are truly important. So assess what's traumatic to you, Seek out a therapeutic support system if you need it. Talk to someone and ask God, how can I be a positive person? But also, how can I sow positivity into the lives of other people? So let that negativity go. If it's around you, we're going to rebuke that, okay? Because it messes with our mental health. And also, we have to be real and cognizant that we are dealing with hard times. We're in a pandemic, we're a health pandemic, a racial pandemic, financial crises. So look at these issues like racism. How did George Floyd make you feel? How did Breonna Taylor make you feel? How do those things impact your mental health? Because it's on TV all the time. We have to be aware of those things because they do take an impact on our mental health. Address forms of discrimination. If you're being mistreated on your job or in the workplace, address those issues in the appropriate manner. Use your voice to be heard. I know Greenwood is a very active community, very involved in voter registration, but when you use your voice to make changes or to vote, you can also make changes in mental health policies. So as a church collective, we have that power. We are stronger in numbers. And so we can use our power to talk about mental health, to talk about these social and cultural issues because they do impact the mental health of African Americans within this society, okay? And again, I talk about boundaries because that's where it really does start. To get more self-care, you're gonna have to set some boundaries. So let go of the people pleasing. Everyone is not gonna like you, that's okay. But what does God say about you? Say yes to yourself more. If you want to do something and you feel God has put it in your heart, if you have the financial resources, say yes to yourself more. A lot of times we give everyone else grace. We say yes to the coworkers, to our church members, to our family members. We say yes to everyone else but ourselves. So say yes to yourself because you are worthy, okay? Decline opportunities. Sometimes we have to respectfully decline. I learned this lesson in 2011. You don't have to take on the world. Your shoulders aren't that broad. God hasn't designed for me or for you to take on every single thing. So respectfully decline opportunities if your plate is already full, because what ends up happening is that you say yes to it thinking, well, I don't want someone else to get it, or maybe this opportunity won't come around. And then you find yourself stressed out because you've also said yes to 3 or 4 more things. And if you haven't really looked at your calendar, those things may align the same week. So do only what feels good to you. Do those things that lead to your purpose, to you walking out your purpose. And if not, let someone else do it. It's okay. There's room for all of us to eat. There's room for everyone. Delegate responsibilities to others. I've learned this as I've been working in academia. It's okay to delegate responsibilities to other people because other people need to learn also. I believe in succession. It's not just about me. How can I train the next person to do what I'm doing? So delegate responsibilities that are on your plate to other people. Take a bow. And this is really important, especially as we think about the work in the church. If you are doing something well or performing it well, instead of holding on to that role or activity for 10 years, for 5 years, step away from it. Train someone else. Let someone else do it. Let someone else take over the young adult ministry. Let someone else do Women's Day. Let someone else lead and serve and use their skills. Again, hubris comes in, that pride when we say, I'm the only one who can do it. Show someone else, okay? Because that's what we do, right? And lastly, ask for compensation when required. If you are doing something and working on a role, sometimes we get really quick into volunteering a lot because this is what we do culturally. We like to support the community. We like to do things. But a good friend of mine told me this. He said, Shani, sometimes you need to put a dollar sign to what it is you're doing. Yes, do your activities that where you're volunteering, do those great things. But sometimes people take your kindness for weakness or they take that in vain. So whatever skill God has given you, if there's a way to monetize that, ask for compensation versus going home and feeling a sense of resentment because people didn't think to pay you and you did whatever work. You spent 15 to 20 hours on a project, investing your time, investing your personal energy, and they didn't think enough to pay you or compensate you. So those things are called advocating for ourselves, okay? And seek out peer support. There are many people who are willing to help you get more self-care. No person is an island. We all need help to achieve our goals, whether those are spiritual, physically, financial, health goals, whatever your goals are, we all need help. It's okay to be vulnerable and to ask individuals for help. Sometimes in the church community, it's hard for us to be vulnerable because we don't necessarily know who we can trust, but be vulnerable and ask for what you need. Asking for help is a form of self-care. Even as I'm a caregiver, I have resources. I asked my husband for help. He has been wonderful in helping me. He steps right in with whatever it is that I need. But I also look for community resources, the VA, whatever it is to help me do what I need to do for my parents so that I can lighten my load. I ask for help, and I encourage you to do the same thing as well. And lastly, you'll see a picture of me here a couple years ago cycling. I just took up cycling because I love it. I have a Peloton now, but prioritize your health. One of the things I talk about that's truly important to me is that my parents are stroke survivors, and I saw how all of that happened. And it came from being good-hearted people, but not necessarily making the best nutritional choices. Some of that dealt with access, some of that dealt with doctors, but prioritize your physical health. God wants us to be healthy and well, and we're all not going to have the same physical capabilities or the same access to everything. But if you can, take a walk, take a 30-minute walk, get something on your schedule, find you an accountability partner, whether it's walking, running, cycling, whatever it is you need to do, make sure you prioritize your health, because African Americans are leaders in diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, chronic illnesses. And some of these things can be managed with nutritional tweaks. If your doctor says, hey, you need to get on this medicine, it doesn't mean you can't get off, but take that medicine and take it on time and do what you need to do for your health. Because when you refuse to do it, or if you don't make that change, your health suffers the consequence, all right? And you're not able to contribute in the way that you want to. It comes at a cost. So make sure you take care of yourself physically as well, because it is so important. Other things you can do: meditation, prayer, talk to others, look at healing, okay? Look at ways to deal with some of the traumas that you have. A good book I just read and listened to was Viola Davis's Finding Me. Viola Davis has had so much trauma in her life. I mean, it's just an amazing book, but it is a good blueprint for getting healed and dealing with the traumas that we all have experienced. Write a book in your time. You all have a testimony. You all have a story. It could be cathartic. It could be the next way for you to talk to someone else about self-care. Use wellness apps, volunteer, coach, practice social distancing. Honestly, it causes a lot of anxiety when we want to wear masks and other people don't. So just do what you need to do to help maintain your mental peace. If a mask feels good to you and washing your hands all the time, I would say do it, okay? Because we know we are in challenging times with this pandemic. And also, we can do many things at different levels. At the policy level, advocate for healthcare, Medicaid expansion, research on health equity, mental health in rural areas like Greenwood. We can talk to our churches and congregation about suicide prevention. We can host seminars and health fairs that really address mental illness or mental health, just like you're doing today at your churches. Also have a safety plan in place. We know that there was a church shooting several years ago. What is a safety plan for your church? What's Brooklyn Chapels? What's Friendships? What's the safety plan if you are dealing with a person who has a serious mental illness and they are hearing voices? What's the safety plan for your church? And at the individual level, we can talk about mental health in our homes. I applaud my family because I remember going to mental health centers to see and visit my grandmother, and it was all of our family there to support her. So I had that therapeutic outlook from a very, very early age. Talk about estate planning in your home. What is the estate plan? Do you have a living will in place? Do you have a safety plan in place? So these are some of the things that we can talk about as we think about mental health, mental wellness, physical wellness, financial wellness, because they all work on a continuum. And so those are some things that we can all do. Some recommended healthcare sites: the American Psychological Association, MD Anderson, COVID self-care resources. University of Buffalo has many great resources on self-care, as well as Wayne State University. So I thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope you were able to glean some information about self-care. But my final concluding point to you is you are worthy of self-care. Is your self-care and your worthiness is not determined on your external output, what you give to other people. You are worthy of time to yourself. You are worthy of self-care just because God created you to be his child. He loves you. I love you. And so always know that you are truly, truly worthy of that time to yourself. Thank you so much. I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Woods. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I'm sure others did as well. We have a number of comments in the chat box. I want to go in and see if there are any questions listed. And while I'm looking through, if Pastor Nevels, if you have any comments, feel free to make them at this time.
Dr. Woods, what an awesome, awesome presentation. Look, I'm trying to take notes. I have so many notes, and I'm just glad I had to remember, hey, it's on YouTube, so we can go back and play back. I do appreciate everything. You gave us so many nuggets. One thing that, just a couple things, you were talking about burnout. And I remember when I was in grad school, Tina and I were in Baltimore at the time. I think we were on child number 3. I think child number 3 was on the way. And I remember being in graduate school. I was the only African-American in the program that I was in. They didn't give me any, they took away my funding and different things like that, but I still had to get things done, right? Mm-hmm. And so I got to a point where I was taking this one class and I just didn't care anymore. I didn't care. And it was to the point I stopped doing the work or whatever. And the professor actually came to my lab and tried to talk to me and say, hey, you need to do this so you can pass. And I was like, man, you just have to do what you have to do. I was literally to the point where I just couldn't do, you know, and you gave so many tips about self-care and being worthy. I wanted to ask a question. For the person who does not have a self-care plan, and I'm pretty sure you touched on all of these things, but what, I know you touched on it, but how can a person, for the person who's at the starting point, what should they do to begin a self-care plan? Like the very first thing that they should do, like where do they start?
Okay, that's a great question, Dr. Nevels. The first, and thank you all so much for listening. This has just been a wonderful opportunity for me, and I truly value any time someone asks me to talk about self-care. But a starting point would be to go to identifying those stressors. This, you don't even have to have a formal plan because I don't necessarily, but what are your top 10 stressors? You can even start with your top 5. What is stressing you out the most? Make that list, make it in a journal. Start with those things and almost eat that elephant bit by bit. So if your stressor is dealing with, I feel like I have too many work responsibilities, or I don't know, or too many church responsibilities, how can you delegate this? Okay, so you may have a little charts in your little notebook. You can all do is handwritten. But what are those top 5 stressors? What are those things? And the second column should be, how can I take something off of my plate? What can I do to alleviate some of this stress? If it's a stress with your health, your doctor is giving you a report. I have this, I have that. What can I do to shore up this area so that it's not creating a sense of stress for me? But I will tell anyone, whatever those stresses are, make sure you're getting some exercise in. It could be any type of stressor, but make sure you get exercise in, because it helps you to think clearly as you're working through identifying your stressors and working through trying to knock some things off of your plate. But just start by simply jotting down what's stressing me out the most. How can I maybe pass some things on to other people, or how can I really find a way to take some of this stress off of my plate?
That's good. You made a comment that was talking about, just using the church, for instance, how sometimes we may feel that we're the only ones who can do something. Sometimes it could be that because we want to get things done, but we have to be careful that it's not a source of pride, just like you were saying, to feel that God is not able to create someone else and empower someone else to do that same job. That's really good. One more question. I'm not sure if anyone else has put one in. How can, even developing a plan for self-care, we have to care for self, but also do you think we have a responsibility to help others as well? You know, how can we be supportive of others and their self-care?
Well, I definitely think we have a obligation, a moral, as I mentioned, moral and ethical obligation to help other people, because what happens is when other people around us are a little burned out, it's going to impact that whole system. You know, we aren't just in silos by ourselves, okay? And so, for example, if you know someone within your family who perhaps is a heavy load, if that person is willing to open up, to be vulnerable, because sometimes it's a hard conversation. Sometimes we lack awareness. We don't know that we need some additional support, or we aren't aware that we're even taking on, or that our plate is this full. Sometimes we aren't even aware of it. But if you see a person who's sinking, yes, we do have an obligation to help that person, to assist. And sometimes it's just even by saying, hey, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? I noticed that, you know, you may have a lot going on. Is there something you want to talk to me about? Or is there any way I can help you? I'll use Timothy as a good example. I do have a lot of responsibilities providing care for my parents. But one thing my wonderful husband will say is, Shani, how can I help you today? And I think that's a good thing for couples to do, and for anyone, even just in your home environment. If a parent sees a child is stressed out, or even as our children see parents are stressed out, how can I help you? What can I do to support you? That's where it really starts. It starts with a conversation. And from that conversation, you'll be able to, people will start to open up, or they'll become disarmed. They may say, well, I didn't know this resource. And I'm a social worker, so I'm a resource person. But sometimes we don't even know that resources are available to assist us, and that people can come in to assist us with whatever need it is. And sometimes it starts with us just asking, or inviting someone to a cup of coffee, inviting someone to prayer, or inviting someone out, you know, given the restraints of the pandemic, but being a friend to really reach out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Look, one more question. While you were talking, you made a comment about how sometimes we pick up stressors from our parents, or from generations above. And I just thought about generational curses, you know, and how we can pass that on. I was thinking about how one night, I think, you know, sometimes I stay up at night, do work and different things like that. And my kids, I think I fell asleep on the couch, and my kids came in trying to cover me up and was like, Dad, go to sleep, and cut the light off. And then it hit me, even when you were talking, I don't want them to feel like they don't have to stop till your body just gives out and you just fall asleep somewhere, or different things like that. And so it's basically what, you know, just everything that you were given, it doesn't just stop with us. It's about the next generation and the things that we're teaching them. We have to start teaching self-care. And even as a church, we have to make that, we know how God is good, God is great, but, you know, he created the Sabbath for a purpose, for us to stop and take that time. Amen.
That is so true. And like you mentioned, sometimes we don't even know. We just get into a rut of just doing, going, because we do have to meet demands on our job. We do have to meet leadership demands, and that does require a lot of us. But you are so true in saying that, because social learning theory tells us that we take cues from our environments. And yes, our kids are watching us. Just like I was watching my mom stay up to, and I'll never forget when it started to dawn on me as a child. You know, we always had these wonderful and glorious holiday gatherings. But I remember one day my mom was up all night making sweet potato pies. And I saw the next morning, it was getting in the afternoon, and she was still working on the pies. I said, Mom, you know, did you stay up all night? And she was like, yeah. And I was just saying to myself, you know, forget those pies. Nobody needs them. I know they're good and everything, but we just don't have to have the pies at this party if it's going to cost you so much stress and just staying up and not being able to really enjoy the festivities like the holidays. And so I started to recognize at a very early age that, you know, my holidays are going to need to be a little bit different. Okay. I just want some peace and quiet, and I love family around, and that's all good and everything. But my holidays will definitely look different than the holidays that I was fortunate enough to experience with my entire family. But for me, our holidays are gonna look different. I'm not gonna stay up cooking all night.
you know, setting boundaries with people you love can be difficult. You know, even if you're doing something great for them, but it's something that we have to do. That's something that we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then sometimes it's a hard conversation, especially with our families. But, again, that's where that self-awareness comes in. If I see that Kanika's plate is a little full, I'm going to try to say, hey, how can I help you? How can I support you? And, we come together on some things and say, okay, we're going to work through this together so that it's a win-win for everyone.
Amen. Amen. Well, I tell you, I thank God for both of our church families here. I can speak specifically to Brooklyn and Strangers Home, and that there's always the training of the next generation. It's something about teaching. Even with Sunday school, it's sharing the load. You don't just have one person teaching. You have different teachers who come in and do different things, and so, but even you highlighting that tonight, it lets us know that this is something that we have to actively pursue. I mean, something we have to, really put emphasis on.
Yes.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? Because I promise you, I'm going to stop right here because I have so many thoughts and different things like that. Amen.
Well, ask away, and I did share my contact information. So if you all would like to contact me, or if you're interested in a presentation, and doesn't necessarily have to be on this topic, I talk about mental health. As I mentioned, my grandmother and my family provided a good example of what a therapeutic process looks like and what it means to support a person with a serious mental illness. I worked in behavioral health, and I just like talking about those issues because oftentimes in our community, we don't elevate that conversation. You think we do, but oftentimes we don't, specifically as it relates to the church. So I applaud your churches, Pastor Neville, Brooklyn Chapel, as well as Strangers Home, and First Lady Neville's and Crystal, y'all my class, y'all my family, my neighbors. But we applaud you guys for taking this initiative because it is needed. And I hope that this video circulates so that people can reverberate this in their churches and in their community spaces because it's definitely needed.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal. I just thank God for our health ministry team from both churches who are working together to make sure that we as a congregation start to do better and taking better care of ourselves. With the walks every Saturday, just different things, and trying to focus on what we eat, and then just taking note of the different types of diseases and conditions out there, and not just waiting until after the fact, but being preventative, taking preventative care and different things like that. All right. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Crystal.
Oh, thank you. And once again, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Woods for agreeing to come and share with us. Everything that you've given us is so informative and inspirational. And I'm sure that so many people who are tuned in today will take these things that you've given us and apply them in any way that we can, just to improve ourselves and just to have a better and positive outlook on our lives. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before we conclude, I do want to make a few announcements. Next Monday at 6:30, we will also host another Wellness Monday where our topic will be breaking through bad habits for mental health success. So again, that's going to be next Monday at 6:30. More information will follow. Also, for those who may be in the Greenwood area, the Strangers Home MB Church and Brooklyn Chapel MB Church Health Ministry will sponsor a health fair on Saturday, May 21st from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. We will have health screenings, free health screenings. We will have Dawn McMahon, Chief Nurse from the Office of Emergency Planning and Response. We will also have a presentation from Mr. Tim Stansel, giving us healthy tips using karate. And our featured speaker for that morning will be Dr. Don Sayas-Speech, a licensed professional counselor. And again, that health fair will be May 21st. It will be at Strangers Home MB Church, 314 West Taft Street.
Crystal, I'm sorry, one more thing. Dr. Woods, I know you didn't come on here to do this, but You mentioned your She Devotional. Could you please let us know how we can get a copy? Because
Everybody
I
on here already has one.
I know,
It's
right?
everybody from Greenwood. They've already supported so well over the years. But yes, it's available Amazon, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble. And Crystal just reshared my Linktree link, so you can just click on that link and order a copy. Thank you so much.